history of our country, since it was founded, civil disobedience has been, let's say, a cornerstone. All the way from the very beginning of the country, the American Revolution, everything that led up to it before civil disobedience became uncivil. War. The colonies were being taxed without representation, basically taken advantage of. Mercantilism reared its head. At least that's what the Encyclopedia of American Revolution says. So we had the Boston Tea Party, we had letters and treatises written, new political theories emerged that didn't exist previously, all to revolt, all to let the powers that be, the people in charge, in this case the King of England, know that we were displeased. So obviously we know how all that turned out. Let's move forward. 1894, the Pullman strike, which was one of the first real labor strikes in United States history. The Pullman Company had about 3,500 people working for them, including a Mr. Eugene Debs, who the Pullman Company built a township, built a town, and the workers there received wages, but additionally they received subsidized housing, lowered the price of, they had like a company store essentially. I'm sure you've all heard that song. Anyway, then in 1894, the Pullman Company lowered wages across the board. There were no labor laws to prevent them from doing this at the time. So they lowered wages, but they didn't increase salaries. So naturally, this led to poverty and squalor for the employees, and particularly their families. Most of these men had families. A lot of them were women and children. The people that suffered from this, excuse me. So we had the Pullman strike, and while it was ultimately unsuccessful, ultimately resulted in Mr. Debs going to prison, it kind of set the standard that as Americans, as a culture, as a civilization, we were not inclined to let more powerful people take advantage of those who can't defend themselves. We'll go even further. In the 60s, civil rights movement changed the complexity of America in a lot of ways. Mr. Paul Bukowski even stated that it kind of resulted in a little bit of a change in thinking, because you had people from groups that historically were either not involved or outright against any sort of segregation or any sort of, desegregation, any sort of inclusion of African Americans into the populace of America. All of a sudden you had white folks, brown folks, Asian people, all banding together in ways no one had ever seen, and it changed our culture forever. The United Farm Workers, Mr. Cesar Chavez, migrant workers had a really hard way of things in the 70s, particularly those of Filipino and Latin American origins. So the United Farm Workers Union did quite a bit to change that. And it was all through what we have as a right as Americans, which is the right to protest, the right to demand better from employers, from our government, from anyone. And even today, you see it happening, and whatever your political opinions are, doesn't matter. This is a right that we have, and it can change the world. It has changed the world, and it will continue to. The right to free speech is essential to our civilization, and we see examples all over the world of what happens when that right is not allowed to us. So I say that without the right to protest, without the right to disobey, our country wouldn't be what it is today, and the world wouldn't be what it is today. So we have a lot of people to thank in the past for getting us to where we are today.